Before we start, though, do you guys want to introduce yourselves as David Suzuki?
Oh, yeah.
You know, the little speech? Okay. So before they start, the kids here just want to introduce themselves as a school before the whole debate. Is that okay, Mike?
Sounds good. I'm recording. Go.
So hello, thank you so much for joining us in this debate to argue whether the death penalty is effective or not. My name is Bavitra Sinathambi, this is Ria Shah, and we are the representatives of the David Suzuki Secondary School, and our entire team is really excited for you to be joining us in this debate. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you so much. Chance, do you want to say something? Get up again.
I'm too tall for this. Okay. Hi, my name is Chance Hall, and I guess I'll be standing here and representing Del Valle High School from Del Valle, Texas. It's an honor to be a part of this experience, and we're ready when you are.
Thank you. Okay, we will be starting with our first argument of economic and financial.
So there are many financial benefits that the death penalty would bring to countries in North America. Firstly, the average cost in America to house an inmate is approximately $31,286, while in Canada the cost is approximately $31,000 annually. These types of expenses take care of the inmate's security, healthcare, operational, and rehabilitation. So it is a bit higher than the average person's cost for living because they do have to take care of security and operational expenses. Considering the average life expectancy of a person is 82 years old, to keep one inmate who is sentenced to life in jail, it would cost approximately $2,542,000 according to these statistics. The cost of a lethal injection is between $85 to $850. The cost of a guillotine, which has unlimited uses, is $1,200, and the cost of the electric chair is approximately $220 per use. All of these options are much cheaper alternatives to keeping even a single prisoner for a life sentence alive.
Next, the death penalty will result in less money being spent on trials. Having the death penalty will likely result in the defendants pleading guilty more often, resulting in less unnecessary trials. The death penalty also makes it so prisoners have less opportunity to exercise multiple habeas corpus petitions, once again resulting in less trials. Trials are very costly procedures, costing around $15,000 per trial. And many trials can last up to 10 days, meaning the cost for just one case could be as high as $150,000. Therefore, reducing the number of trials results in the conservation of significant amounts of money.
Lastly, the death penalty will save money. It will significantly reduce the size of recreational facilities, and according to the Sentencing Project, 1 in every 9 prisoners in America are serving life sentences, meaning the death penalty will reduce the total amount of prisoners, minimizing the size prisons need to be, thus significantly decreasing the amount of money needed to operate and maintain such large facilities. In conclusion, establishing the death penalty is financially beneficial because it is cheaper than keeping a prisoner for an entire life sentence. It results in less trials and reduces the need to maintain and operate ridiculously large recreational facilities. It is for these reasons that many countries employ the death penalty. So why shouldn't Canada and America follow suit?
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be right there. Thank you.
Today, the matter at hand is the death penalty and whether or not its continued use should occur. This is a controversial topic that is debated all over the world. However, the cost of the death penalty is far better than that of life in prison, and it gives the same sense of security, so it's an extent and purpose better. This should continue. Is it justified that a person who has committed serious crimes lives in a prison with all the basic amenities at the cost of taxpayers' money? The cost incurred on house inmates are sentenced life imprisonment goes into millions by sentencing these convicts to death. This money which will be otherwise spent on their lectures can be used for a better purpose. Besides, most prisons are already filled in the capacity. By sentencing convicts to life, we will only put more pressure on the treasury. Many people argue the death penalty is costlier than life terms. Whether it really is again debatable. Proponents of death penalty argue that it's opposition to the practice that it makes costlier. They argue that the legal proceedings are often stalked for years together as a result of multiple layers of appeal, which in turn adds to the overall cost. This, however, is unavoidable. In any case, the appeals are costly, yes, but the appeals in any case, life in prison or the death penalty, one must ensure that the innocents are not put to death while the others are perhaps lessened sentence given parole on the taxpayers' dollars. U.S. News report that 206,000 inmates are serving life in prison as of 2017, according to the New York Times. Number when it comes to the amount of taxpayers' dollars on the prisoners, and the prominence of the cost of the death penalty is 1.26 million, is less than the 6.4 million the taxpayers' dollars currently serving those in life imprisonment. Furthermore, the emotional weight in the victims and the victims' families. In 2015, the FBI reported nearly 15,700 homicides nationwide. And the 2007 study suggested that for every homicide victim, 6 to 10 family members are indirectly victimized. They figure it's true that many friends, colleagues, neighbors, and other people are also suffered when a person they know is murdered. When they grieve, survivors must not only figure out how life goes on with other loved ones in it, but also process the violence behind the person's death. The weight of this can be eased in knowing the true justice and being served. Because of these reasons, we could actually lose money by abolishing the death penalty. And that's not even taking the emotional cost into account. The death penalty is needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your first argument, and now we'll be moving on to our second argument on the ethical side.
Crime rates have gone up in North America. The death penalty ensures a safer environment and as it provides closure for the nation, because those who mourn the victims will be at peace. The guilty should be punished for their crimes because their life is no greater than their victims. A few studies have shown that capital punishment lowers rates of crime due to the final sentencing. The death penalty has many ethical benefits for both the nation and even the guilty.
Acts of criminal revenge can occur after a prisoner is discharged from jail. As it is noticed, it causes distress among civilians in that specific area. Achieving death row relieves both those who have witnessed the crime and the victims for those who have been pressed charged towards that specific crime. Victims of murder can respect that justice system is not showing a sense of morality towards the implication of jail sentence, considering that most criminals won't be taken to get a fair treatment for what they've done, especially for ones who have committed more heinous and brutal crimes. There's a correlation between the amount of criminals put onto death row and the amount of crime rates that have been dropped towards the United States from 1990 to 2010. As case studies have shown, it was an exactly similar correlation as more and more people who have been curled into death row would be exemplified and also been influenced towards this newer change. And it would also threaten others who would most likely do the crime in later years to not do that circumstance in the later future. And as it is, it'll have a psychological impact towards those who would do it in the near future and cause them to not do it anymore or have any more heinous crimes portrayed towards that. And maybe end up in death row themselves in the near future. They would not protect themselves to towards themselves to that goal. Thank you.
All right, now if we could hear your argument for the ethical side.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. Today we will put to rest a long-standing question in society today, whether or not the death penalty should continue to be used as a form of justice. The answer to this question is an irrevocable affirmation to this method. This is unquestionable. Although ethics is one of the main points of controversy in this debate, this could not be more cut and dry. The death penalty is a human way of asserting justice and protecting the common good. The death penalty is completely constitutional in its careful handling towards the actual execution. Some opponents of this may say that it violates the Eighth Amendment. This couldn't be farther from the truth. There is nothing cruel or unusual about this. The criminals are put in a coma-like state before the process even begins, thus making way for as little pain as possible. They die with grace and in a completely legal way. Furthermore, everyone on death row has a reason to be there. In Saudi Arabia, they kill by beheading or shooting the people for things like adultery, armed robbery, or drug-related offenses, whereas in America, we most commonly use injections or electrocution for murder committed during a drug-related drive-by shooting, murder during a kidnapping, murder for hire, or genocide. Most of the time, the criminals are repeat offenders that have been given a second chance. They are the people that cannot be allowed to walk the same streets as you, me, or anyone who could be potentially harmed. Opponents of the death penalty will claim that the capital punishment is unnecessary since a life sentence accomplishes the same objective. What the death penalty opponents neglect to tell you is that the convicted murderers and child rapists escape from prison every year. In fact, as of June 19, 2015, over 130 prisoners escapees are still on the loose. The death penalty can protect society from infractions such as these. While on the matter, there is also justice to think about. With criminal acts like homicide, rape, etc., becoming more and more frequent in this society, only the death penalty can ensure justice for the victims and their families. In most of these cases, the criminals are not first-time offenders, and they can get deterred by the fear of capital punishment. If they have committed a crime, they have a right to be brought to justice. We have a right to bring them to justice. Those in support of this practice also argue that the person who kills someone doesn't have the right to live. Once again, abolitionists will be quick to retort the Gandhi quote, "An eye for an eye will make the whole world blind," which is sad because it undermines the difference between convict and victim. It's not revenge, as referenced in Eye and Eye. It's retribution. It's not the same. This is justice for the people. Because of these reasons, the death penalty is the best option today. Thank you.
Okay, we can begin with your rebuttals. I know this sounds kind of strange because somehow or another we were mistaken. We thought we were supposed to be against the death penalty too. So we can kind of go with rebuttals and see as well as.
Okay, guys, that's fine.
So one second. Just tell me 1 second.
Sorry, just 1 second, please.
No worries.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify if you said that you guys would take the con side and we would take the pro side for the rebuttal period.
Oh, I didn't say that, but we could try to do that if you want to, or we could try to argue different aspects of the con side. Because even though I think our agreement was the same, we could look at that or whatever you'd like to do.
Sorry, just 1 more second. I'm really sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Could we do it this way? Could we do pro and then you do con just for the rebuttal part? Or do you want it to go opposite?
Oh no, that's perfect. We'll do con and you guys can do pro for rebuttal.
So we're going to argue that the death penalty is not effective.
And you guys can argue that the death penalty is effective.
Yeah, right. I kind of took that the Canadian side versus the Texan side here.
Okay.
Okay. So I'd now like to open the floor to rebuttals.
You guys need a moment to think first?
Just
Give me 2 seconds.
Okay, can we just get, I'm so sorry, can we just get 2 more minutes to think about our
worries.
arguments?
A great job.
Thank you.
we are ready to rebuttal if you are.
Yeah, we are. Go.
So you guys talked about the amount of financial and money needed for the death penalty and how it's a lot of money for this to happen. However, a lot of money goes into making sure that the people who are on death row and who are on death row, there's a lot of money that goes into that to making sure that they are actually guilty. The amount of money that actually goes into that may outweigh the cost of them actually staying. Sorry, I got confused with the question. It may actually outweigh the cost of everything else because it costs so much for these trials to happen. Also, there's the habeas corpus petition. So people who are actually on death row may want to do more of these petitions and more of these court trials to try to get off death row. They want to have these appeals to make sure that they are not on death row anymore. And this costs a lot of money for this to happen. So it actually takes away a lot of taxpayers' money. It takes a lot of money to go into these law trials to make sure that these people are actually guilty.
Furthermore, people are on death row for 10 to 20 years. So you're not only paying for them to be on death row, but you're paying for their entire duration in prison, which actually increases financial costs.
Moreover, it should not be overlooked that the prison system, in particular in North America, is a very prominent source of jobs. In fact, if you log on to Indeed.com, just on Indeed.com, you're going to find 3,600 plus jobs just under the prison sections alone. And this does not include all the delivery and maintenance and factory work that goes into maintaining the prison from the outside.
Okay. Thank you.
Much of the cost comes from making sure that the person is guilty, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
By saying that you're mentioning all the appeals and all the trials that the person goes through when they're found guilty, and then they appeal to make sure that the evidence lines up and stuff, right? With all that, by doing that, you're not saying that the cost of the execution procedure, which is the death penalty itself, you're adding on extra costs because you're taking into account more than the actual death penalty cost itself, where the cost of that is only the execution. The appeals and the trial courts have nothing to do with that cost whatsoever, because anyone can go through that many appeals and still get life in prison and still get convicted. To say that the cost of the death penalty includes all of those trials would be factually incorrect and misleading.
So I'm saying that your points do make sense. What I'm saying is that the people on death row, there's laws that go into it to making sure that they are guilty. There's more money factually going into the court system to making sure that those people are guilty, people that are not on death row, as compared to people who are on life sentences. There's more money going into it because you don't want to kill an innocent life.
What I'm trying to say is, with you trying to say that all the appeals that they have to go through, that any person who can be found guilty of the death penalty, or any person who can be found guilty of a life sentence, can go through those appeals as well. So this is just not a death penalty thing. The actual cost of the death penalty itself in its entirety is the execution, because the legal system is not the penalty, it's the penalty that you get from the legal system.
But if there was no death penalty, they wouldn't go through all of these procedures that they do to making sure that that person is guilty. You're saying that's the only cost that's available?
Counselor, the OJ trial went on for a pretty long time, and I'm pretty sure he didn't get the death penalty. Instead, he got a very long prison sentence that just finished a couple months ago. But would you count all of those trials as part of his punishment, as part of his jail sentence?
What we mean is that, for example, Nick Yaris in the U.S., he was sentenced to 2 decades on death row he was wrongly convicted of rape and murder. But those the 2 decades he was there, it was first said in court, you are sentenced to death row for blank, blank, blank. That was first said when he was
in prison for wrongful convictions as well, especially people of, say, color, people of minorities, poorer people, because they don't have the resources to make sure that they can prove that they're innocent. Isn't scientific evidence in court generally used incorrectly and not even held to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. To say that the court system is the problem with death penalty when it comes to economics is wrong, because the court system is not part of the death penalty. The death penalty is given to you by the court system based on your crime that you committed.
So I get what you're saying, but it is factually correct that only the people that are on the death penalty will go through these specific trials, and they'll get a lot more experts in it and a lot more professional and trained lawyers to make sure that this person is actually guilty, that they're not innocent, because they don't want to kill an innocent.
There have been multiple trials where, especially when it comes to celebrities and stuff like that, where they have these high-power lawyers, where they have people who know what they're doing, who have had multiple experiences, and get paid a lot of money for being in that specific trial. That rivals death penalty courts, the OJ trials, anything that has to do with sexual misconduct or sexual assault when it comes to a celebrity. You can look at Taylor Swift's trial, you can look at Kesha's trial. Just to say that all of this happens, all of this money goes into making sure that people die on death row is misleading and wrong.
What you mentioned here is something of truth, yes, and we do see this a lot with celebrities. However, it is more prominent with celebrities. Celebrities being a more rare case in the general population. When we're dealing with the general population, you have people who are sentenced to the death penalty, and the death penalty being a trigger, all of a sudden all these other funds are being allocated towards making sure that the death penalty is in fact justified and going through with the system. And yes, as you mentioned before, there are flaws with the system, and those are flaws with the system that come with even life sentences. So those are kind of a constant between both of the sides that we're arguing here. But what we're saying right now is the death penalty, as soon as that name is mentioned, it triggers a lot more funds to be added to the system to make sure that it is carried out properly. And yes, with celebrities, we see that case in both instances, but they are an exception. They don't represent the large population that we're dealing with here that do deal with these trials and that do face this the death penalty more regularly in America and in North America in general.
The whole point of your economics was the fact that you were trying to add extra cost into something that shouldn't have had extra cost added to it. The death penalty is a one-time cost for a one-time procedure that kills the person. That is the death penalty. To say that all of this extra money from legal battles that will inevitably happen anyway because of the way that the law and legal structure is held up is incorrect and misleading. Especially the fact that you wouldn't add those you probably wouldn't add those totals to life sentences or prison sentences, but it comes up all of a sudden when we're talking about the death penalty.
Okay, so you classify the death penalty as a one-time cost where you're executing a prisoner. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of executions are pushed back. Oh, sorry. A lot of the executions
chooses to go through. The appeal process is not the death penalty. The appeal process is the appeal process, and at the end of the appeal process, that's when the death penalty takes place. But
financially, you're still spending more money to keep those people in prison. You still have to feed them. You have to give them a place to stay. It's more money in the long run for keeping these people on death row in prison. I'm so confused. Sorry, you can speak if you want.
But on that train of logic, wouldn't the best plan of action to be to not have appeals? Because if you're going to add the appeals to the cost of the death penalty, let's get rid of them all in their entirety.
But that's changing the Constitution. We're here to argue the effectiveness of the death penalty, not the effectiveness of the Constitution.
But the effectiveness of the death penalty comes in its one-time procedure that when it gets pushed back, it's due to an appeals court that has nothing to do with that.
But the fact of the matter is, in real application, appeals are a part of it. The death penalty is always pushed back. People are scheduled for one day, but many times they aren't actually executed on that day because of these appeals. And this has to be taken into consideration when talking about the death penalty.
Counselor, when the person's dead, they can't appeal anymore, right? So there's no more costs? Instead of, say, paying them over and over again annually each year, which can rack up more money, especially if they have a long appeal process. Since I guess we're adding that in. If you have a long appeal process and then you get life in prison with no parole, wouldn't that cost more than a long appeal process and one death penalty execution?
In theory, I agree with you, but in application, people are on death row for decades, and so why not just give them a life sentence instead of putting a death penalty on them? People die before their actual execution day for the death penalty. So why don't we just give them life in prison instead of implementing a death penalty?
Because how many people come back to life after they're dead?
What?
How many people come back to life?
Okay.
How many people come back to life after they're dead?
But the process of implementing the death penalty is way longer and not as effective as just giving people life in prison.
For years.
I can't hear him.
You're on mute, I think.
I'll let you try to get your speech in a little bit, okay? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. What was I saying? I forgot what I was saying. Okay, what I was saying was it's more effective to give people life in prison because they are spending decades on death row. Instead, just give them life in prison. And to your fact where you said we can just kill them in one time. But in practical application and not theoretically, people are spending decades on death row. There are old men out there right now who are supposed to be on death row, yet die before their execution dates are even instilled.
If we want to go with that, then how come? No, I can't say that. That's due to the appeals. That's not due to the death penalty in its entirety. I'm not saying that.
Appeals are a direct result of the death penalty. You must have appeals in order to establish a death penalty.
Not only that, but death row is a special section of a prison where inmates are awaiting their execution. So it's not like it's a normal part of the prison. There are higher costs for an inmate who is on death row for their safety.
You to say that appeals are a direct response to the death penalty would be, in fact, would be incorrect due to the fact that we've had appeals in America for a long time since the birth of the legal code itself, and also the fact that in multiple other countries that have the death penalty, like for say Iran, they try in the morning, and if they're found guilty, they're killed that afternoon. So to say that the appeals process is a part of the death penalty and comes along when you say the words death penalty is incorrect and misleading. And to say that the cost of appeals is a part of the cost of the death penalty is also incorrect and misleading, considering the fact that the appeals is not a part of the death penalty at all. It's a legal road that the person chooses to follow, and that is it.
While appeals alone aren't directly a part of the death penalty, the increase in appeals should be accounted for because the increase is a result of the employment of the death penalty. If the death penalty wasn't there, we wouldn't have such an increase in appeals for the death row prisoners.
It's because we're dealing with the death penalty that the court takes such caution.
Counselor, if you want to say...
Okay. To take such caution. I'm sorry. Okay. It's because of the death penalty that the court takes such caution. all right. You.
Say that the number of appeals has risen. Has the number of appeals risen in Iran where they don't have any appeals? Where again they try you in the morning and then you're dead by evening. The number has not risen because the number has stayed 0.
Yes.
Sorry, can you repeat that point one more time?
To say that the number of appeals has risen as a result of the death penalty would be incorrect because has the number of appeals risen in Iran due to the death penalty where they kill you in the morning? Well, you're tried by morning and killed by evening? No, that number has remained 0.
But Iran's way of dealing with the death penalty is very different from the way that America deals with the death penalty.
You're citing a system in Iran that is not what we would agree in Western culture to be ideal or perfect. And in fact, this comes down to an issue again with the process, the system, and not exactly the death penalty itself. So we don't believe that this fact can hold as the argument you're trying to present with it.
Wait, so let me get you straight. You said that it's the problem with the system and not the death penalty itself, right? So that means that you're arguing that the cost of the system should be included to the cost of the death penalty when you just went against your own point right there in that statement, correct?
No, we're saying that the fact that you're citing Iran's system, or you're citing the fact that in Iran that this is the case, doesn't apply very well to the death penalty we're dealing with in North America.
Can you turn it on for a second?
It's on.
Okay. In Iran, you can be sentenced to death for homosexuality, whereas in America, they don't believe in that system. So to say that in Iran, the death penalty is effective is not a very, it doesn't give a clear picture of the death penalty in America, or in North America, to be more specific.
Counselor, Counselor, it may not be called the death sentence, but you can still be, well, no, I'm not even gonna go down that road. That road is awkward and really weird. But I'm trying to say is when you're going for the system, you said the American and the Iran system are different. So you're adding all the costs of the American system that leads to the death penalty, correct?
We're not discussing the cost of the system in this case. We're discussing the validity of the system in the argument that we're talking about. The Iran system doesn't reflect the system that we are discussing in this debate, and therefore it shouldn't pass as the evidence of what the reality of the death penalty is as expressed in North America.
But Counselor, isn't death still death? So we're still talking about death penalties, and we're talking about death penalties around the world.
But the fact of the matter is that if we're talking about death penalties around the world, we also have to establish what is ethical when talking about the death penalty. And for example, in Iran, the execution of people based on their beliefs is not tolerated in other parts of the world. So that leads into the ethical discussion of this argument.
If we want to go into the ethical part of this debate, are you aware of solitary confinement?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. Are you aware that solitary confinement is a part of the incarceration system and is used for higher level cases, such as, say, people who have committed murders?
Yes, we are.
Are you aware that multiple studies, psychologists, and mental health experts have called solitary confinement cruel and unusual punishment and torture because of the fact that humans are social creatures, and to keep people alone for a long time give people different mental disorders and is very damaging on the human psyche?
Are you aware that many psychologists and experts say that the death penalty is a form of cruel and unusual punishment for people, especially because you're taking a human life?
Counselor, how can you have that study if the Counselor, how can you have that study with psychologists and human health experts if the person is dead?
Because people are researching the quality of life and the effectiveness of the death penalty, and the fact of the matter is that it is not very effective.
So how are you going to do that if the person is dead? At least when you study solitary confinement, which is, as you say, a part of the incarceration system that generally will deal with the types of people that you're deliberating with right now. You're saying it's better to make them crazy and to make them even more insane and to make them even more dangerous than to get rid of them on the spot. You're also saying that you advocate for making people crazy and unhealthy, or you're
well, if you're arguing on the issue of mental health of people, there are many experts that have said keeping people on death row for dozens of years, for decades, wouldn't you agree that that would impact someone's mental health and therefore decrease their quality of life?
Furthermore, people on death row are also kept in solitary confinement as time. So that argument can go for both life sentences and people on death row.
Yeah, but counsel, the people on death row will die a lot quicker than people who have life sentences. And also, wouldn't you consider that being held in a prison for your entire life, for the rest of your life, is more damaging than just dying?
That's not a proven fact that people on death row, die before people on life sentence, because a lot of people on death row actually spend their entire life in prison because their executions aren't even processed.
Can I find an example of that?
What an example. We'll get back to you on that. Just give.
Counselor, if we also want to include ethics, you do admit that there could be a possibility for the convicted to continue to break crimes either by breaking out or other means, correct?
Sure.
1%.
So you would willingly allow criminals to be placed into a system where they can commit even more crimes and break even more ethics and even more morals in a society, then get rid of them while you still can and while you know that
But they don't necessarily have to be in society. They can be in prison. Put them on life sentences instead of putting them on death row. That way you're not taking their life forcefully.
Not only that, less than 1% of the total population of 1,001,100 state prisoners have actually escaped. So saying that prisoners escape and then go off to society to commit heinous acts aren't quite realistic.
Counselor, 1% of 1 million, if I recall correctly due to math, is at least 1,000 people. So that's 1,000 criminals. That's 1,000 hardened people who have gone through prison and who have broken out past all of security and are in society. Isn't that a bit dangerous to you? Considering that even if we'll say it's in America, that they can spread quite far, quite fast. It's 10,000, okay. But Counselor, that's a lot of people to break out of prison.
It's unmuted.
So what about the people that are sentenced to death and they die and they're actually proven innocent afterwards? There's a lot of cases where people are actually proven innocent after they die, and you're taking away an innocent life when they were innocent. They weren't proven guilty, or they weren't actually guilty.
In fact, over 150 people in the last few years have been taken off death row because they were innocent, and this was based off proof.
Counselor, what about all the people who have been put on life sentences but were proven to be found innocent while they were committing their life sentence or after they died at the end of their life sentence? We could have this argument both ways. It's not going to work out.
Yeah, they lived. Those people that were put on life sentences and they were proven innocent, they lived. If they were put on death row, they would have died. Their life would have ended right there. They were put on life sentences and they lived. They got to live the rest of their life out free.
But Counselor, aren't they still incarcerated, and that raises a lot more economical issues because you have to keep on paying for them even though they were innocent, and you ruin their life by taking them out of circulation for a few years?
At least you're not killing them without getting that proof before. Putting them on life sentence gives them more chances to appeal and prove their innocence. Putting them on death row can just kill them instantly and not give them those second chances. Furthermore, currently there are 243 people on death row, and only 5 executions happened so far in 2017. So clearly the death row executions are being pushed back, to your previous point that you were talking about.
Even if they are put on death row, once they're put on death row, the investigation stops. Therefore, they would never be proven innocent. Therefore, even if they were proven innocent, it wouldn't have been we lose out situation. It would have been a stop situation. Whatever evidence they had, whatever case they had, would have been closed, and therefore it wouldn't have been reopened unless someone of the family said, well, this isn't true, this isn't right, and it would have been reopened. Therefore, it's not a very true, valid statement of saying, well, they broke out, or I'm not understanding that. What was your point on that?
1 second, please.
So here are 8 people who were executed and considered innocent after. Number 1, Cameron Todd Willingham. In 1992, he was convicted of arson murder in Texas, and he was believed to have intentionally set off a fire that killed 3 kids, and he was put to death in 2004, actually. Unfortunately, Texas Forensic Science Commission, they later found out that the evidence was actually misinterpreted, and they concluded that none of the evidence was actually valid. So there are 8 other examples like this I could read to you, but I think you understand what I'm saying at this point.
And Cameron could have gotten more chances to prove his innocence if he were put on life sentence instead of put on death row. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Oh God, so progressive.
8 out of how many people, though? I mean, even if it was however how many, 8 out of how many people are put on death row doesn't really matter. Death row happens every day. Therefore, that's 8 days out of 365 days of the year where the case is closed.
Also,
but those people died for no reason. So you say taking a person's life, even if they're innocent, is a good thing? Those people died for no reason.
Counselor, you can take a person's life by putting them in jail forever until you realize that they didn't do anything wrong, which happens over and over again. In fact, a man just got out after being in jail for 40 years because of wrongful evidence. And
he got a chance to go on and live.
Got his job back, yeah, but that was it. His life was robbed from him for 40 years. He had to be out of society and watch society grow as he was stuck in a jail cell.
His family is broken up.
Okay, but that man was able to get out and live his life afterwards. But this man named Cameron Todd Willingham, he died. He was put to death, and years later he was found innocent. What is he supposed to do? Like you said before, people don't come back to life. This person will not be able to come and relive their life. What are they going to do with the years that they were in jail? What will they do now?
Even if they are in jail, what are they going to do with their lives? They're in jail. What is your point on that?
Counselor, people have died with life sentences and then they were found innocent. So really, we can keep on having this conversation all day, but it's not going to change anything. If you want to talk let's talk about the ethics that you're invoking on a human person when you put them in solitary confinement, when you put them through harsh treatments, such as what goes on in prisons. And let's avoid.
Well, another ethical or even moral issue would be: don't you agree that the reason people do go into jail is to you could say punishment, or to learn from their crimes, or to figure out like this is wrong, whatever you may say, white people are put into prison. Well, if we decide as a society, well, we're going to put these people on death row and we're going to decide that, who are we to decide that, okay, these people deserve to die? Wouldn't that just be doing the same thing as those people initially did, whether they were murderers or they were rapists? Just like any crime they committed, who are we to say that, okay, these people deserve to die? Wouldn't that be just kind of contradicting what we did in the first place by putting them in jail?
But you're contradicting yourself. If you're a murderer, who are you to decide who else dies and who gets raped? Therefore, it's equal judgment. If you kill someone else, I think you should be killed yourself. It's equal judgment.
But that is not
That's
me.
why rehabilitation exists, so they can go to prison and learn from their mistakes and be rehabilitated, or spend their life in prison and try and work on being rehabilitated. That's why death row is obsolete and not needed.
And that's also not me contradicting my point, because exactly what I was saying was that when these people decided, okay, they were going to murder other people. So if we decided to, you could call it murder, or you can say we're putting them to death. It's still, we're killing people. We're taking away human lives. So is that because what they did was wrong by murdering people, wouldn't what we're doing by killing them also be wrong?
Rehabilitation means you go and
Just a moment, and we'll be right back. We're getting some announcements.
Okay, go. So you mentioned that that's why rehabilitation exists. But can you rehabilitate a serial killer? Can you rehabilitate someone who is known to have a mental disorder? Because rehabilitation doesn't always work. It usually doesn't work. If rehabilitation worked, then there wouldn't be second offenders. Go.
Also, rehabilitation doesn't always work, but at least you can try. You can attempt to change someone's ways, because why, without trying at all, just sentence someone to death? If you have the opportunity to make them a better person, to do good, to do what they couldn't do, then why shouldn't we take that chance? Why shouldn't we make them better? And also to add on that, the death. Okay.
But counsel, wouldn't that cost more than the death penalty?
Not when you add on the drug.
9 times out of 10, the rapists do this act more than once. And 9 times out of 10, if they put on death row, it happened more than once. And I'm pretty sure they tried to do it before, and they still kept doing the same exact thing they did before. So I'm not trying to hear what you're trying to say about giving them a chance. Why should a rapist out on the streets if they've been told multiple times to stop raping people? They've been stopping to keep them still.
Also, it has been proven that
Turn it on and keep talking.
Also, it has been proven that 60% of the people who are released from jail are actually go back and they commit another crime. And basically, they always commit the same crime they have committed before. So with you saying that it will be a way for them to rehabilitate, you're actually saying that you're actually taking out the opportunity they can go back out to the street and commit the same crime, kill another person, rape another person, and then come back to jail. So
you're essentially apologizing for their actions.
You're not apologizing for that.
They are atoning for their sin.
But alternatively, the death penalty isn't helping deter these sociopaths, because essentially, if they're willing to commit these heinous crimes in the first place, they're not necessarily fearing death. So the death penalty isn't really helping lower the recidivism rates and helping these people not commit crimes in the future.
Not only that, but the American Civil Liberations Union has actually stated that the death penalty has no deterrent effect at all. Once again, American Civil.
Yes, that's the
Civil
American Civil Liberties Station thing.
Counselor, you say it doesn't deter, right? But it gets them off the street, right? If you put them in rehabilitation centers, they won't come back to do it again.
Life sentencing also
In Canada, we don't have a death penalty, and we have a lower crime rate than America. So clearly, the death penalty doesn't work.
No, Counselor, that is some.
We have way less people. So like,
our recidivism rate is like literally 3%.
No, you can't defend it because of the fact.
What do you need? Oh my God, Jesus. It limits the right for them to commit a crime. Isn't it true that Texas has more population than Canada as a whole?
Wait, what?
Say again?
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Can you please repeat that?
Isn't the population of Texas greater than Canada as a whole?
Yes.
Yes.
But your point you made was that crime.
But if you're measuring it per capita, then Canada still has a lower crime rate. Per capita. But that's what you measure per capita. Per capita is the average per person. So that's why if you measure per capita, it evens out and makes the average. So like mathematically, it works out.
Can you explain that?
So per capita, it measures per 100,000 people, and it's by average. So per capita, if you were to measure, Canada still has a lower crime rate than America as a whole.
This takes out any discrepancy in population density.
So it evens out discrepancies that comes with population density.
Not only that, but I actually have a statistic from Detroit and Canada, and it's based on the average of 500,000 and more. The homicide rate in Canada is 1.8, while U.S. it's 6.4. Aggravated assault, 156, while in the U.S. it's 365. And essentially, I'm saying that in Canada, the rate is lower than it is in America.
And that's because we have a lower, we don't have death penalty.
Well, no, because you have a lower population. If you have a lower population, there's gonna be less rape. There's gonna be less crime. So with that being said,
Because we have a lower population, we're measuring it per capita. Because we have a lower population, we're measuring it per capita, so it evens it out with the American population. That's what per capita means.
Well, since you said that, what is the crime rate in Toronto?
On what? Population?
Our crime rate in Toronto is
Okay, even within Toronto, the population of Toronto is around 4.7 million, while the population of Phoenix is only 3.2. But the homicide rate of Phoenix is 7.2, while Toronto's is only 1.7. The crime rate there shows even though Phoenix has a smaller population than the whole city of Toronto.
And we're looking at a
Taking off this.
Yeah.
Talking about just Phoenix and Toronto. Phoenix is in the middle of a desert. Toronto is in the middle of an ice cap. But still, your point is what? What is your point behind that?
That actually helps our point, because if Phoenix is in the middle of the desert, as you were saying, and they have more of a crime rate than us in Toronto, so that helps our point.
How?
Toronto is a very large city. While if you're saying that Phoenix, as you said, is in the middle of the desert, doesn't that mean that, okay, so Toronto as the larger city should have a lot higher crime rate, but Phoenix still has a higher crime rate than Toronto?
Where are the statistics between the correlation of crime and death rate? Death penalty.
So Canada believes in rehabilitation and putting prisoners and rehabilitating prisoners, and we rather believe in life sentences instead of death penalties. So the correlation between crime rate and death penalty is that by having these rehabilitation programs, people are less likely to offend, which is why the death penalty is not needed. Whereas in a place like Texas, where the death penalty, for example, where the death penalty is there, it's not as effective as homicide rates per capita are higher than the ones in Canada. If it makes sense now.
Implying that you can rehabilitate a serial killer? Is that what you're implying?
No, we have. Carla Homolka was a serial killer. We rehabilitated her. She's back in society and she hasn't reoffended. That's a fact. You can search it up. Carla Homolka.
One out of how many? Out of how many people has that happened?
But you asked me if we can rehabilitate a serial killer. I just proved to you that we can. Your question was, can you rehabilitate a serial killer? We have. Don't go back on your question now. Don't go back.
I'm not going back on my question. What I'm saying is, one out of how many people? A serial killer means yes, one serial killer. But one serial killer off the streets means no serial killer at all. Rehabilitation does not help anyone but that one person. How many other people has rehabilitation helped? Is my question. I'm not going back on my question. I have no regrets.
I have to turn the ad blocker off.
When you compare Toronto and Buffalo, see the crime index in Toronto is 34.65 and in Buffalo it's 42.20, and the safety scale in Toronto is 65.35 and in Buffalo it's 57.80. And they're both major cities, and yet again,
2 hours apart.
They're 2 hours apart, and the crime index in Toronto is less and the safety scale is higher than it is in Buffalo.
So
we're measuring two cities in the same
same geographical region.
You keep bringing up Texas, but New York doesn't have death penalty, correct?
You want to bring up
why it's effective.
Excuse me, could you repeat what you said?
I said you keep bringing up Texas, but New York does no longer has a death penalty, correct? So you can't.
Sorry, can you give us 1 minute? We kind of lost internet. 1 minute. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
We have
Yeah.
Technical difficulties.
Sorry.
So just a second.
Okay, thank you so much. We just had a technical difficulty.
Go.
Okay, we're ready now.
You're arguing heavily on statistics. Can I state that the lowest crime rate in America has the death penalty, but also the top 10 lowest crime rates, 8 of them don't have the death penalty. So these are obviously contradicting statements, contradicting statistics. So statistics will always contradict each other. How can we use them to efficiently back up any argument? Statistics we can't use them to back up anything. They're flawed. They're what?
Correct.
They're not correct. There are always going to be flaws in it, vulnerabilities that anyone can exploit. So basically, we should take statistics out of the argument. Correct?
I agree with that, but we need statistics to back up our points because it has to be factual information and not just based off our personal opinions.
Back up your points, but how can your points be correct? How can your points be valid? They can't, correct?
But that applies to both sides. You guys have been using a lot of statistics as well.
You just took out your own argument, correct? We have more than statistics backing up our.
Can you just restate what your actual argument is?
Our argument against statistics or our argument for the death penalty?
Against the death penalty.
We are for the death penalty.
And statistics.
We are arguing that statistics cannot reasonably back up any argument on any side because they are flawed and vulnerable and they're not valid, which is correct.
So then what should we back our arguments up with?
Cold hard facts. You have
those are statistics
or facts.
Okay, so can you give me an example of a cold hard fact without a statistic, please?
Oh, I got you. Ooh. Therefore, you said rehabilitations, prisons, juveniles, and everything is what we should use instead of death penalty, correct?
Say one more.
It's an option, yes.
As an option, great. Putting criminals on death row will cut the cost on American taxes. Corrections, prisons, juveniles, and parole other correction programs make about 5% or $55 billion. Those costs.
You just use a statistic, I'm sorry. 5% and 55%.
5%.
Oh, that's not statistic. It's his use of statistic. That's not valid.
Anyway.
She's like, that's not valid.
The Vera Institute just released that in 2012, a great aggregate cost of prisons in 2010, 40 states participated in $39 billion. This will cut back on tax spending greatly. So cost is my point, a cold hard fact.
It has increased to $87 billion. It has increased to $87 billion.
And it has increased to $87 billion standing on today.
Just mine?
So you're talking about the financial aspect of the death penalty, correct? Clarify?
What?
Could you please repeat that?
Can you repeat that, please?
You just talked about the financial backing of the death penalty.
Financial backing. Financial backing. Is that what you're saying?
Monty, speak as well. Sorry. You were just talking about the financial aspect of the death penalty. I just want to clarify.
Correct.
That.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Correct. So it does. I'm so sorry. I was back to the con side. I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh my God.
We'll just take a second.
Sorry. I just had like a little. I'm so sorry.
You're good.
Can we get a second, please?
Yes.
We have 5 minutes left. We've just been informed of the time.
Repeat that, please.
We have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
5 minutes is good enough, guys.
If you want to give a summary on your side, we'll try to give a summary on our side if you want to. Or what have you learned today by doing this process with, by doing this could be good as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you. We'll do the summary of what we've all learned today.
All right.
Would you like to go first?
No.
Or should we go first?
Yeah, we'll let you go
We'll
first.
let you go first.
We're neighborly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
This way so they don't see.
It's over here.
Should I go to the middle or should I just
Wait,
All right.
we learned that.
Just say it. Just...
Wait, does it have to benefit them?
No.
It's on. It's like we're sharing now.
Oh, shoot.
We're sharing time.
It's okay. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we wanted to start off by saying we learned a lot about different sides of the death penalty, and we learned about different perspectives people can have on the death penalty and different arguments that people can present when discussing the death penalty, and it really isn't a simple issue, and I believe we've tackled a lot of points, maybe not covering the whole, but definitely touching on a lot of the important aspects of the death penalty and why it is such a difficult issue that we still discuss to this day. And we also learned a lot about different cities in the United States and how similar they are to us, even looking up on the fly the different populations and densities. It was nice to learn about our neighbors. Anything else that we wanted to add?
We understand that this is a very controversial issue and that at times it got very heated, but at the end of the day, it was a very fun debate and we really enjoyed talking to you all and learning about it. We have a lot of points that we agree with you, and obviously a lot of points that we disagree on, but at the end of the day, it was a very fun time to get to spend with Texas.
We hope that we can...
I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, we hope we can do this again. And
Okay. Go. Well, yeah, points are taken. Yes, understandable. But I do believe that we did have some great points as well as your opposing as well as our opposing team. And it would be great to do it again. We also learned that it will cut back on National Day. We also learned that rehabilitations will help a murderer, which is true. But yes, we would like to do this another time. Okay.
Personally, I learned that statistics aren't reliable and that it causes a lot of strife between neighbors like us.
ISIS.
I learned that there was a lot of sides and that you could take either one and not one is correct. It's more of there's things in between.
Okay.
I learned that the cost of the death penalty, it's by adding all the process, it's more, it could look as more, but when you go and you look at yearly of the money that's actually spent on actual prisoners being in life, it's more than actual the death penalty itself.
Yeah, and I learned that we have some really nice, good neighbors there in Canada, and we'd love to do this again.
Absolutely, and we look forward to it.
Okay. All right. Clay, just tell me a topic, and we'll be glad. Next time I'll try to double check. I thought we were taking the side here in the United States. I thought you were taking the Canadian side, so that's my fault.
No problem, Mike. Appreciate you making a connection with us under such short notice, because I asked you a week ago, and you said, sure, let's do it. And it's always nice when you can find somebody in the world who's willing to actually have a emotionally charged debate. A lot of us want to tiptoe around really simple issues. And regardless of, that was someone's phone, regardless of how the debate ended up, it's nice for 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds to actually have this conversation and see that regardless of where we are in the world, we're all kind of thinking the same way. We do want to point out, however, that Toronto, I know I travel a lot down the south, and when I say Canada, people have this picture of Canada. So what would be nice is to connect one more time and maybe show little pictures of what it looks like up here, because I think it was mentioned, I don't know if we just try to push a point, but he mentioned something about ice caps or something like that.
There's no ice caps.
I think those ice caps are kind of melted, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a common misconception for some people who've never traveled up north, that it is a major metropolis that's part of the Golden Horseshoe. There's, I don't know, it's like 10 million people around the Great Lakes between Buffalo all the way up to Toronto. So it's and the whole igloo thing and the polar bears. And, yeah,